just heard the loudest blast in my life.
I was scared. I'm not gonna lie to you, I have never gone through this.
It's a terrorist organization, in my opinion, and we're going to find out. All those questions are going to be answered.
But what people really need to understand, Antifa, is that their true enemy is our system of government and our
DHS and FBI unmask Antifa, a nationwide conspiracy of corruption and chaos. In a seismic upheaval that has sent shockwaves across America, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, have launched an unrelenting assault on Antifa, peeling back the layers of a sinister network that blends corruption, violence, and ideological extremism. From the rain-soaked streets of Portland to the fiery battlegrounds of Atlanta, federal agents have uncovered a chilling reality. Local police officers allegedly bought by Antifa, shadowy funding pipelines fueling riots, and a coordinated campaign to destabilize cities under the guise of activism. This is no longer a tale of isolated protests or rogue agitators. It's a sprawling saga of betrayal, greed, and a federal response that's tearing the mask off a movement that's been hiding in plain sight for far too long. Brace yourself as we dive deep into the most dramatic revelations, weaving together the raw intensity of on-the-ground chaos with the cold, hard evidence of a criminal enterprise that threatens the fabric of the nation. A city betrayed, Portland's dirty cops, and Antifa's protection racket. Portland, Oregon, a city long synonymous with unrest, became the epicenter of a scandal that would redefine public trust in law enforcement. In late 2024, the DHS dropped a bombshell that shook the nation. Local police officers were allegedly taking payouts to shield Antifa militants during riots that left businesses shattered, streets burning, and communities terrorized. The evidence, painstakingly compiled through internal audits and federal investigations, painted a grim portrait of betrayal.
This is something the president campaigned on because we have seen a rise in violence perpetuated by Antifa radical people across this country who subscribe to this group. And unfortunately, it's gone widely uncovered by many in the legacy media. It also went completely ignored by the previous administration. Not anymore.
City records revealed that $15 million siphoned from Mayor Ted Wheeler's police budget under the guise of community safety grants had been funneled directly into activist groups linked to Antifa. These weren't clerical errors or misplaced funds. They were the arteries of a deliberate financial pipeline designed to protect rioters while silencing those who dared expose them. The spark that ignited this firestorm was the arrest of independent journalist Nick Sorter on September 30, 2025, outside an ICE facility in Portland's industrial district. Sorter, armed with nothing but a camera and a determination to document the truth, found himself in the crosshairs of both Antifa and the very police sworn to protect him. As masked militants swarmed the facility, hurling fireworks, bottles, and vitriol at federal agents, Sorter moved cautiously through the crowd, his lens capturing the chaos. But the mob turned on him. They threw punches, tackled me to the ground, he recounted, his voice thick with disbelief. My equipment was smashed, and I was left with bruises. Seeking safety, he approached nearby Portland police officers, expecting protection. Instead, a sergeant pointed at him and barked, "Cuff him!" No explanation, no charges, just handcuffs and a ride in a police van. Sorter's arrest wasn't an isolated incident. That same week, reporter Katie Davis Court was struck in the face with a flagpole while covering the same protest. The suspect, a masked Antifa member, walked free as officers stood by, their inaction deafening. Another journalist, assaulted and pleading for help, ran to police only to be met with indifference. "They refused to make an arrest," she said, her frustration palpable. "3 officers just stood there, watching me chase down the suspect myself.
They allow people into their membership. They have votes, they have leaderships. It's much more organized than people realize.
DHS reports documented over 100 attacks on the ICE facility by this point, yet not a single Antifa member faced charges. The pattern was undeniable. Journalists and counter-protesters were targeted, while Antifa operated with impunity. The deeper DHS dug, the uglier the truth became. Internal city audits exposed a web of financial ties between Portland's administration and the very groups orchestrating the violence. The $15 million in community safety grants meant to foster peace and equity had been redirected to nonprofits with direct links to Antifa. Some of these funds even reached ex-officers who retained access to police resources, suggesting a protection racket that went beyond negligence. It was complicity. When the cops stopped protecting you, the question hung heavy in the air. Who are they protecting? The answer lay in the money trail, a labyrinth of grants, wire transfers, and activist collectives that federal investigators were now determined to unravel. As the scandal broke, Portland's streets became a battleground, not just for protesters, but for truth itself. Residents, already weary from years of unrest, felt betrayed by the very institutions meant to keep them safe. Small business owners, whose storefronts had been smashed during riots, demanded answers. "We called the police for help," one shopkeeper told local reporters. But they just stood there, letting the mob run wild. DHS briefings confirmed the grim reality. Portland police had failed to enforce basic riot laws in over 20 documented attacks on the ICE facility.
A lot of people get into it because they want to, so, there's an error, especially when you're younger, that, you're out here and you're doing something, and that's very appealing.
The inaction wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate, fueled by a financial network that turned law enforcement into pawns of political violence. The federal response, a nationwide crackdown on anarchy. As Portland's corruption came to light, the FBI and DHS shifted into high gear, launching a sweeping nationwide crackdown that sent Antifa's network reeling. By mid-2025, federal agents were kicking in doors across Georgia, Oregon, Texas, Chicago, and Los Angeles, targeting the operational core of what prosecutors now labeled a criminal enterprise. In Atlanta, the epicenter of the resistance, 61 defendants faced charges under Georgia's racketeer. Influenced and corrupt organizations, RICO Act, laws once used to dismantle the Italian mafia, now aimed squarely at Antifa. The charges were staggering: arson, money laundering, charity fraud, and coordinated assaults on police and federal facilities. The Atlanta operation centered on a group calling itself Defend the Atlanta Forest, a loose coalition of eco-warriors, anarchists, and self-proclaimed anti-fascists who had turned a proposed police training facility, derisively dubbed Cop City, into a war zone. Aerial footage captured the chaos. Masked demonstrators, armed with rocks and Molotov cocktails, swarmed the construction site, setting equipment ablaze and chanting, "No Cop City." When law enforcement moved in, they found more than just a protest camp. Tents were reinforced with sandbags, stockpiled with gasoline, fireworks, and body armor. Spray-painted messages like "Fire to the Earth Destroyers" bore Antifa's signature, a chilling hallmark of their ideology. Of the 35 arrested, only 2 were Georgia residents, revealing a stark truth. This wasn't a local uprising, but a meticulously coordinated, out-of-state operation. In Texas, the stakes escalated further. On a quiet night in early October 2025, an ambush outside the Prairieland Detention Center left a local officer bleeding from a neck wound. Investigators say attackers used fireworks to lure guards into the open, then opened fire from a tree line. By sunrise, 10 suspects were in custody, but the real breakthrough came with the evidence. Tactical vests, radios, and propaganda manuals titled Organizing for Attack, Insurrection, Anarchy matched those found in Atlanta, tying the incidents together across state lines.
Under your leadership, President Trump, we're deploying the full might of the federal law enforcement to crack down on Antifa and other domestic terrorist organizations led by Stephen Miller.
This wasn't about a training center or detention facility, one DHS official declared. This was about anarchy, a deliberate attempt to destabilize our communities. The raids didn't stop there. In Portland, a converted warehouse believed to be a distribution point for protective gear and cash was hit by DHS's Special Response Team in a 6-minute operation. In Chicago and Los Angeles, safe houses yielded encrypted phones, hard drives filled with chat logs, and maps marking police facilities as targets. One file, labeled Security Culture 101, read like a corporate manual, complete with shifts, passwords, and travel budgets for an organization that publicly claimed to have no structure. The evidence was mounting. Antifa wasn't a loose collective of idealistic protesters. It was a network with a command structure, shared tactics, and a funding pipeline that spanned the nation. Following the money, the protest industrial complex. The smoking gun in this sprawling investigation was the money trail, a labyrinth of financial transactions that DHS analysts dubbed the protest industrial complex. This shadow network, composed of donors, legal teams, and logistics coordinators, transformed local protests into a nationwide machine of chaos. Nonprofits in Portland, Seattle, and Chicago, linked through identical wire transfers and event permits, were funneling funds to activist collectives orchestrating nightly riots. One Portland nonprofit alone processed hundreds of thousands in grants, some to ex-officers with police access, suggesting a level of insider collusion that sent chills through federal investigators. In Atlanta, a charity registered to a single P.O. box handled thousands of micro-donations labeled bail support. But when agents compared these transactions to receipts from raid sites, the numbers told a different story. Purchases for gas cans, camping fuel, and tactical gloves. In New York, a sister nonprofit publicly promoted environmental justice but privately reimbursed out-of-state travelers heading to direct action zones. The system was efficient because it was decentralized. No single treasurer, no headquarters, just shared templates circulating through encrypted chat servers like Discord, Signal, and Matrix. Every cell handled its own intake, then sent surpluses to a rotating list of trusted collectives. The funding trail led to major players: George Soros's Open Society Foundation, the Arabella Funding Network, the Tides Foundation, and Neville Roy Singham's network, among others. Researcher Seamus Bruner, in collaboration with the Government Accountability Institute, uncovered what he called Riot Inc., a coordinated system that moved over $100 million to radical groups while evading scrutiny. Crypto wallets and foreign exchanges were used for micro-laundering, converting small donations into larger sums that vanished within days. One spreadsheet, seized during a Seattle raid, tallied $310,000 in just 6 months, funding everything from travel to protective gear. President Trump, briefed on these findings, issued a stark warning. "We're going to be very threatening to them," he declared, his voice resolute. Far more threatening than they ever were to us, and that includes the people funding them, probably some of the people I dine with, but they're in deep trouble. Attorney General Pam Bondi echoed the sentiment, comparing the crackdown to dismantling drug cartels. "Fighting crime is more than getting the bad guy off the streets," she told the press. "It's breaking down the organization brick by brick. We're going to take Antifa apart, from top to bottom." Her words were a clarion call, signaling a federal effort to choke off the financial lifelines that kept Antifa's chaos alive. The financial investigation revealed a chilling pattern of coordination. In Portland, City Hall funds moved through nonprofit intermediaries to activist collectives. In Georgia, a PayPal account received small donations the same day a safe house ordered bulk camping fuel. The overlap wasn't theoretical. It was financial proof of a national network. Federal agents traced crypto transactions to foreign exchanges, uncovering conversion points where small sums became larger payouts. Every dollar leaves a fingerprint, one investigator said, and those fingerprints were leading to a web of donors, shell charities, and cash apps that fueled Antifa's operations. The ideology of chaos inside Antifa's playbook. At the heart of Antifa's network lies a toxic ideology that fuels its violence. Rooted in anarcho-communism and accelerationism, Antifa believes America's institutions, police, capitalism, the government, are inherently oppressive and must be dismantled by any means necessary. They despise capitalism, a former member explained. They think destroying it will bring some utopia of equality. This narrative, peddled as justice, lures recruits with promises of liberation, only to trap them in a cycle of radicalization and violence. Former member Gabriel Nadals described the recruitment process as insidious. It starts as a social club, he said. They make you feel welcome, get you riled up on their ideologies, and just when you think you've joined a group to vent your frustrations, they hand you a mask. Encrypted chats on platforms like Discord and Signal serve as recruitment hubs, where casual political debates morph into lessons on building firebombs, blocking police vehicles, and erasing digital footprints. Manuals like Security Culture 101 outline operational details, from shift schedules to travel budgets, revealing a corporate-like structure for an organization that claims to be leaderless. Journalist Andy Ngo, who has tracked Antifa for years, described their tactics as anarcho-collectivism, a rebellion anchored in a quasi-religious faith that wiping out the government is a moral imperative. They tie their ideologies to a sense of divine mission, he said. To a lost teenager looking to belong, that's incredibly powerful. Recruits, often young and idealistic, are drawn in by the promise of fighting fascism, only to find themselves pressured into violence. If you're on the fence, Nadal's warned, silence is violence. Your comrades become a problem for you. The deception is deliberate. Antifa portrays itself as a grassroots movement opposing fascism, but insiders reveal a darker truth. It's a dangerous tool of violence aimed at bringing down the government. Their tactics, diversion with fireworks, ambushes from concealment, and digital brag posts are templated across cities. Even their slogans and fonts are standardized, suggesting a level of coordination that belies their public image as spontaneous protesters. They want people to believe being Antifa just means opposing fascism, Ngo said. But it's a lie to hide their real goal: permanent resistance through violence. The human cost: journalists targeted, communities terrorized. The human toll of Antifa's campaign is devastating. In Portland, journalists like Nick Sorter and Katie Davis Court paid a heavy price for exposing the truth. Court, struck in the face with a flagpole, watched as her attacker walked free under the gaze of idle officers. Sorter, tackled and cuffed, believes his conservative views made him a target. They make arrests based on observed behavior, he said bitterly. In my case, that behavior was being a conservative. A third journalist, assaulted and pleading for help, was ignored by police who stood by as the mob ran rampant. Residents felt the betrayal just as keenly. One Portlander, assaulted during a protest, ran to police only to be met with inaction. 3 officers just stood there, she recounted, watching me try to hunt down the suspect. Small business owners, whose livelihoods were destroyed in the riots, echoed her frustration. We begged for help, one said, But the police let the mob do whatever they wanted. DHS reports documented over 20 instances of non-intervention during riots, raising questions about whether officers were complicit or coerced. The Justice Department's civil rights investigation, launched on October 3, 2025, demanded answers. Body camera footage, arrest logs, internal emails, and after-action reports to determine if Portland police engaged in viewpoint discrimination, targeting conservatives while giving Antifa a pass. The betrayal cut deeper in communities already scarred by years of unrest. Families living near the ICE facility described nights filled with the sound of fireworks and breaking glass, with police nowhere to be found. "We felt abandoned," one resident said. "The city was more interested in protecting the rioters than us." The financial ties between city officials and Antifa-linked groups only deepened the sense of injustice, as taxpayers realized their money was funding the chaos that terrorized their neighborhoods. The federal hammer. From investigation to prosecution. By October 2025, the investigation had escalated into a full-blown federal corruption probe, spanning multiple states and agencies. Assistant Attorney General Harriet Dillon's letter to Portland's Police Chief Bob Day and City Attorney Robert Taylor was uncompromising. Hand over everything: body camera footage, arrest logs, internal communications, or face consequences. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division, under Attorney General Pam Bondi, authorized a joint review with federal auditors, examining every case where counter-protesters were detained while Antifa members walked free. The scope was no longer limited to the arrests of Sorter and Court. It was a systemic inquiry into whether Portland had breached its consent decree with the DOJ, which mandated fair and impartial policing. In Georgia, the RICO indictment stretched over 100 pages, detailing a conspiracy that spanned arson, money laundering, and assaults on police. Prosecutors argued that Antifa's claim of being unorganized was a deliberate tactic to evade accountability. "They have votes, leadership, a structure," one official said. "It's much more organized than people realize." The FBI's Joint Intelligence Cell pieced together financial records, digital evidence, and field reports, transforming Antifa's chaos into a prosecutable chain. Judges approved expanded surveillance warrants for online coordination, and DHS embedded liaison officers in local police departments to share intelligence in real time, thwarting copycat plots before they could ignite. The crackdown was relentless. In Portland, federal subpoenas demanded correspondence between grant administrators and protest organizers. In Seattle, a raid on a townhouse uncovered Faraday bags filled with phones and flash drives, revealing a network of communication hubs. In Dallas, surveillance teams shadowed a suspected logistics coordinator for 3 weeks, seizing a laptop and a binder of passwords that led to multiple safe houses. The evidence was overwhelming. Antifa wasn't a myth or a loose ideology. It was a network behaving like a syndicate, moving funds like a cartel, and striking like an army. The backlash and the future. A nation on edge. As the federal hammer fell, Antifa's network began to fracture. Nonprofits suspended operations, city attorneys froze grants, and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force re-entered cities like Portland after a 5-year absence. But officials warned of a looming backlash. Smaller cells threatened sympathetic action if their leaders were jailed, and the narrative of state oppression fueled recruitment. "Every takedown can make them stronger," one DHS agent admitted. Extremists thrive on the idea that the state fears dissent. The findings were damning. A financial network that funneled ideological money into street violence, protected by complicit officers and enabled by a decentralized but highly coordinated system. DHS's final report was blunt. When law enforcement becomes financially entangled with political violence, public safety ceases to be neutral. For Portland, the scandal was a betrayal of trust, a wound that would take years to heal. For the nation, it was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that no city stays neutral when law enforcement can be bought. As federal agents continue to follow the money, from local grants to foreign exchanges, the investigation is far from over. New evidence, footage, and federal responses are emerging daily, painting a picture of a movement that refuses to admit it exists, even as its leaders are hauled into court. The question now is not just about Antifa's past, but its future. Will this crackdown dismantle the network, or will it fuel a new wave of radicalization? One thing is certain: the curtain has been pulled back, revealing a world where ideology, money, and authority have fused into a dangerous machine. A call to stay vigilant. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a battle that will shape America's future. New developments are unfolding, from leaked documents to courtroom dramas, and the fight against Antifa's network is only intensifying. Subscribe to stay ahead of the curve as we uncover the corruption, manipulation, and hidden agendas that threaten our communities. The truth is out there, raw and unfiltered, and we'll break it down first. Portland's betrayal, Atlanta's war zone, and the federal response have exposed a reality the country wasn't ready to face. When law enforcement can be bought, no city, no citizen is safe. Stay vigilant, because the next chapter is coming, and it's going to be explosive.